barrier islands to include Bonita Beach, Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Captiva, and Pine Island, as well as mobile and manufactured homes throughout Lee County, beginning Friday morning, September 8th, so beginning tomorrow morning. For residents in those areas who are evacuating out of the area or going to stay with friends or family or in a hotel or motel, we encourage them to leave today if possible. Staying with friends or family or in a hotel motel is the best option for those residents who are evacuating in those areas. They do not have that option. We will have public shelters opening tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Residents in those public shelters should bring supplies with them. That means bedding, water, specialty food items, medication, any needed items for pets. On the pet side, East Lee County High School and South Fort Myers High School will be the primary pet-friendly shelters, but all the shelters that I'll go down here in a second will have some limited pet sheltering capabilities. Also, for those who are asked to evacuate on those barrier islands and mobile homes and manufactured homes that do not have transportation, we do have a transportation plan throughout the county that we're activating. And what that means is if you don't have transportation, you can go to any Lee County bus stop and you will get to a public shelter that's open. So that will be activated also at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Tolls at Lee County's 3 bridges, Midpoint, Cape Coral, and the Sanibel Causeway are suspended until further notice. And I'll go ahead and go down the list of shelters right here. It's 7 shelters: East Lee County High School, Varsity Lakes Middle School, Harns Marsh Middle School, Oak Hammock Middle School, Island Coast High School, South Fort Myers High School, and the Estero Rec Center. So as we discussed this morning, the most likely arrival of those tropical storm force winds and additional impacts would begin, from a conservative perspective, midday, late day Saturday. Of course, that's all subject to change as the storm approaches and gets closer, and we'll be able to refine, any additional actions we'll have to make. But we wanted to make these decisions based off safety and that uncertainty in Irma's forecast. A couple additional items. Sanibel is implementing mandatory evacuations of hotels beginning at 6 p.m. tonight. They're also calling for a voluntary evacuation of Sanibel at 6 p.m. tonight prior to the mandatory evacuation tomorrow morning. And also, again, that mandatory evacuation tomorrow morning on Sanibel, like the other barrier islands. So that's all I have right now. I'll turn it over to Jeff with the airport.
Good afternoon, Jeff, J-E-F-F, Mulder, M-U-L-D-E-R, Lee County Port Authority. So both of our airports, Page Field and RSW, are open. Our plan is to have them open throughout the weather event. We'll have staff on site 24 hours a day for both facilities. The airline schedule, we've had some airlines cancel some flights beginning tomorrow. We've had a couple cancellations today. There will be some airlines that will be operating flights over the weekend. That certainly is subject to change. Would ask certainly that you check with your airline for the specific status of the flights. Also, just a reminder that although we will be open, the terminal building at RSW is not a shelter. We're not equipped to shelter people. So if you would please pass that on. That's it for me.
Good afternoon. I'm the Sheriff Carmine Marcino at the Lee County Sheriff's Office. I want to begin by telling you one thing, that Sheriff Scott and our team are 100% certain on every angle that we are out there. We are within our county. We have plans in place. I want you to know that we are going to do everything possible to make sure that you are safe and secure. But most importantly, what we need from you is we need help from you to make sure that you're preparing for a storm. This storm is tremendous, 140 miles wide. We want to make sure that you know it's no joke. So preparation starts now. The mandatory evacuation will be at 0700, 7 a.m. Shelters open up at 9 a.m., okay? So very, very important that you take this serious and you do everything that you can to help us make sure you're safe, okay? Shelters alone, we want to talk about specifically. There have been some questions about firearms and people bringing their firearms to the shelters. You are allowed to bring your firearms. You're allowed to bring your firearms in the car, but I will tell you that you cannot bring your firearms inside the shelter. Okay, so at no time can your firearm come inside the shelter. I will tell you again, preparation is everything, and if you're not preparing, that is a bad day for everybody. So make sure you prepare, make sure you take care of on your end, and I will tell you that we'll do everything to make sure you are safe on our end. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Corporal Schultz, SCHULTZ, Florida Highway Patrol. So in confusion on I-75, so I want to clear that up. I-75 here locally, Charlotte, Lee, and Collier. There's no major incidents right now. Traffic is flowing. You have a minor crash at 160 and then one at the 217, which is in Sarasota, but there's no roadblock with either of those two. So the roadways are clear. We are seeing congestion in Sarasota north of there. Tampa, the Turnpike, 75 merge, you're going to have congestion. Also, Ocala up to Lake City. I would encourage everybody to use the 511 apps if you have a smartphone, or the FHP app. We do have an app now that you can find live traffic situations that you can visit www.flhsmv.gov to download that, or the 511 app, that's www.fl511.com. Also, the governor's office has put out a hotline, a transportation hotline. That phone number is 1-800-955-5504, and that can give you the latest transportation as well. We're in the process of escorting fuel trucks to gas stations. That's one of the missions before the storm that we are doing right now in order to try to get more fuel to gas stations. We would ask, reiterate what the sheriff said, the 3 Ps, plan, have some patience, and pay attention to what you're doing out there. And if you don't have any questions, thank you.
Good afternoon, Tom Bamford, that's B-A-M-F-O-R-D, United States Coast Guard Auxiliary. Pre-storm conditions, the U.S. Coast Guard has pre-positioned personnel, aircraft, and other assets for immediate response after impact from Irma. The first and most important thing is the protection of life, and that's what our goal is. Post-storm, we obviously will respond as best we can for any emergency information that does occur once we are notified. We closely are responsible to work with our federal and state and local partners. We are part of DHS, and if the situation arises, we will be working directly with FEMA as we will with our local partners. What I'd like to do is, real quick, is pass some information to our local boaters, because they're the ones that are still left behind. They need to understand that they need to get those boats out of the area as fast as they can. If they can trailer it out, fine. If not, they need to secure it properly. One of the smart things to do is if you have a neighbor and you're out of the area, perhaps they can help you secure that boat. Same thing would occur if the boat breaks loose or for whatever reason and you are out there, perhaps they know how to get a hold of you, know what your insurance information is. There's an app on you can have for Apple or Android that is a Coast Guard app that has a lot of information, especially if you decide to run this away from the storm, which you shouldn't do. There's an app there that you can have a float plan, so if something happens, we have a good idea where you might be. Another simple thing, if you have any kind of boat toys, let's call them kayaks, paddle boards, and that sort of thing, and they blow off the boat, make sure that you take a Sharpie and write your name and your phone number on it, because if it shows up in the water and nobody's attached to it, guess what we're going to be doing? The other point is that sorry about a second, I got my note here. The key is just pay attention to what's going on and just be smart about your boating activities. Just don't get out on the water and try to outrun the storm. Protect yourself. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Again, some more. Just want to cover a couple of quick things. First one is...
I'm sorry, could you say your name and title for them, please?
Sure. Roger Desjardins, County Manager, DESJARLAIS. I was going to be smart there for a second, but then thought better of it. Just a couple things I'd like to mention. First is, I was having a conversation with somebody about a half hour ago, them knowing we were going to issue an order for evacuation of barrier islands. And the question was, don't you think people are going to think we're crying wolf as that forecast track continues to shift to the east just a little bit? Aren't you worried about that? And the response is, of course, we always worry about that. But in this case, and I'm normally pretty conservative when it comes to calling for evacuation. I'd rather have people stay in place if it's safe than get on the roads and risk getting caught up in that traffic or getting caught in the storm. But in this case, this storm is so large, it's so unprecedented. And any of us who've lived in Florida any length of time have seen that a storm can jog east or west on just a couple hours notice. It can make a 90-degree turn. And this storm was so large, so powerful, I wouldn't want to take that risk of not calling for evacuations on these barrier islands with this kind of storm out there. Because a different storm might feel differently, but this one is just too big and ugly a storm. It's just too damn dangerous. Number one. Number two, you notice that the call for evacuation is a little bit different on Sanibel. That was a request of the city that that we announced the little bit different evacuation schedule. They've got a lot of people on the island right now in all of the hotels and accommodations out there. They want to make sure those folks have a chance to get off the island, and it sort of follows that axiom, if you don't need to be here, then don't be here. Get those folks off the island, and then call for the voluntary evacuation a little earlier than the mandatory, because there's one way on, one way off that island. It doesn't take much of an accident to really slow that evacuation down. So that's why the difference. Anyone have questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have one. It's for Corporal Schultz, though, from Schultz from FHP. What do you anticipate traffic conditions looking like tomorrow? And for folks who are asking, how late is too late to leave?
We would encourage them to leave. If you're planning on leaving, we would encourage you to leave now. I mean, the sooner you get on the roads, the better. It's only going to anticipate that we're going to find that we're going to increase the volume of traffic. So, and if they do find that they run into problems out there, we do have road rangers out there. They could star 347, star FHP. If they do find that they break down in their vehicles, pull to the shoulder, and if they can call star FHP, we'll try to give them some help there.
And at what point do you pull your officers off the roadways?
As the county manager discussed earlier, 40 miles an hour is the rule of thumb. We're not going to have our troopers out there to where they're exposed any more than EMS or the fire department.
Any other? Roger, is there any need for volunteers in any fashion? I know that we trained about 140 volunteers earlier today. Lee, is there still a need?
Yeah, locally we have a volunteer corps here in emergency management. That's a good question, though. I think internally we're okay right now. I know the state of Florida, I believe, with Volunteer Florida, is signing folks up. Saw that come out from the governor's office today. So I would encourage people to look into that Volunteer Florida organization, and I know they have a lot of folks rostered already.
Is there any estimate of the number of manufactured and mobile homes that might be involved?
We can get back to you on a number. I think the unique part is a lot of them are seasonal. So, how many of those people are actually in the county right now is probably a lot less than the number of mobile and manufactured homes.
And by mobile homes, do you mean like anybody that needs a DMV sticker? Is that the description of it? I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that. It's if your home, if you don't feel comfortable staying in that home in tropical storm force winds.
Bill, I think so. It's mobile homes that have DMV stickers, but it's also manufactured homes. Those buildings aren't quite as hardy as single-family homes. Built to the current building codes. So we would include those in the count as well.
Roger, one more question for you, and potentially for the undersheriff as well. You mentioned briefly vetting procedures for these shelters. Can you go into a little bit more detail about how you're going to be going about vetting people, if at all, to get into these shelters?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need help with that one.
So, Lieutenant Terzmala from the Lee County Sheriff's Office. DRZYMALA. With regards to shelters and the vetting of people, we will have a sexual predator offender shelter open under county ordinance that will be at the Lee County Public Service Academy. All of our registered offenders and predators in the county know when they register with us the designated location to report to if they require shelter. With regards to our regular shelters that will be open, they will be staffed with full-time deputy sheriffs that will be checking the registration status of those individuals should they arrive, and we'll be operating under that blanket with the existing county ordinance with predators and offenders only. Did that answer your question with regards to? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions this afternoon? All right, thank you all very much.